I don't think Scotty wants his personal business on the internet. Ruth chapter 4. We're hopefully, as I've already committed to next week being in Galatians, that we can finish this tonight. I'm a bit excited for this because what's usually seen as the boring part of the story is quite exciting, and we'll see why here in a moment. But let's get right into it here. Ruth chapter 4. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. We'll stop there for a second, just kind of clarify what's going on here. In the last chapter, we found out that though Boaz is the close relative, the kinsman redeemer of the family, he did speak of there was one other person that's slightly more entitled to this. And he said he would speak with them and bring forth this whole situation to him before he agreed to redeem the family land and redeem Ruth. But unlike what we have today, where any legal matters we want to handle, there's special documentation, and you can go to the courthouse and have it notarized and verified and made legal. That wasn't the case for them. The city gates was quite literally the public forum. If you had something to say and you wanted everybody to know about it, you went to the city gates. You wanted to make a big business deal, everybody met at the city gates. And to make sure that the deal held firm, you had to have notable people that everybody knew was trustworthy. Usually the elders of the city. They've been around, they know a few things, and they would vouch for whatever was going about. So, two people say, I'm going to buy 3 acres of your land. Sure, I'll sell it to you. Let's go to the gate. Hey, guys, come here. I'm buying this from them. Here's the money. Here's the deed. Everybody saw that, right? And that's how the deals would go down. So what Boaz is quite literally doing is saying, hey, got some business with you. You guys, come here. You got to hear this. So he's pulled everybody aside at the city gates. Then he said to the close relative, Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, has to sell the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought to inform you, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here and before the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you. And he said, I will redeem it. So, because I'm legally obligated, it's the right thing to do to let you know Naomi's back in town. Our brother Elimelech is dead. His kids are dead. Basically, the family farm is up for sale. You have first right to say you want it. And so he says, okay, just let us know. We got everybody here. The deal's ready to be done. Do you want it? And the gentleman says, I will take it. Boaz is a bit of a businessman here, though. What did he forget to mention? He's offered the beneficial part, the money-making part, it's nothing but good news for you part. But there's a catch. Then Boaz says, on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name deceased on his inheritance. So you want all the great deal of it. Well, there's one other catch. You have to marry the Gentile woman that came along with the deal. Now, He'll get into this in a moment. We'll see a little bit of this, but the problem isn't so much you also get a wife in the deal. It's that if there's no other family members, this land is just yours. But if there's another family member involved, it's not necessarily you're buying it, yes, but it's kind of a lease. You're the caretaker until the true heir of the family is of age, and then they get it. The inheritance is not exactly going to go to your kids and stay in your family for long. So now it's more of a babysitting job than it is, uncle I never knew died and now I got all of his money. So now it's not such a prize as it is an obligation and a responsibility. The closest relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself because it would jeopardize my own inheritance. It would cut into my profits. Redeem it for yourself. You may have the right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it. So he turns down the deal and says, Boaz, it's all yours. Have at it. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redemption of the exchange of land to confirm any matter. You were kind of making the handshake gesture up here. Well, this is how they did it. A man removed his sandal, gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attestation in Israel. So you make a business deal. It's not a shake of hands or anything. You take your shoe off and hand it to him. The best I can figure, I have not found anything solid that confirms this, but the idea is, okay, we're making a deal. Here, have my shoe. Now I can't run away from the deal. There is, of course I didn't write it down, Deuteronomy 32 has a little bit different explanation of this. Because as we read now concerning at the time of Ruth, that's how it was done. Well, back when Deuteronomy was written down, the rules were a little different. Basically, this gentleman turns down marrying Ruth. According to Deuteronomy, she has the right to take his shoe from him and then spit in his face. And then basically call him a chicken, and then his name would be the one that got his shoe stolen. That would be his new family name. But that was more of just a fun tidbit than anything of a consequence there. So the closest relative to Boaz said, buy it for yourself, and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased will not be cut off from his brothers or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today. And all the people who were in the court and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both whom built the house of Israel. And may you achieve wealth of Ephrath and become famous in Bethlehem. So this is pretty much where the custom that we have in a lot of our legal proceedings where you need a witness to sign. This is basically the origins of that. Because nowadays, do a wedding certificate, bride signs it, groom signs it, pastor signs it, you send it to the court, they say, yep, it looks all good, and they sign it, everything's good. But we still have usually the maid of honor and the best man also sign to attest that they watched this happen. And that's what we were seeing here. They had to confirm. They saw this happen. Moreover, if someone decides to back out of the deal or double cross the deal, you got basically everybody of note in town saying, "You're a liar, quit trying to cheat them." Can you imagine if that's how it was today? You have a wedding ceremony. I'm going to be with you until the day I die. I also will be with you till the day I die. And farm of God, we say we're going to be married. And then a divorce comes along, and then everybody that was witness says, "You're cheating. That's not right." That was essentially the way the business deals would go down here. And so they all confirm that the deal is done. Boaz has essentially bought himself land, inheritance, and a wife. The elders then kind of give a blessing over it, and they mention the woman who was coming into your home, like Rachel and Leah, who were notable women, but there was a lot of catfighting involved in that story, if you remember. I don't know if I would wish that on them, but basically that what started the nation of Israel made that greatness be in your home. Moreover, your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, she became his wife, went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive and give birth to a son. Like we mentioned before, though, this is the time of Judges. It was a very spiritually dark time. So if anybody, the Bible scholars in here, as you read some of the blessing they're giving here, they're kind of looking over the dark parts of this. Do we remember how Perez came to be? He's the son of Judah and Tamar. Judah and his daughter-in-law, Tamar. We have we're kind of seeing a glimpse of how they've kind of gotten away from their solid knowledge. They just know the great parts of the stories. They're forgetting the dark side of these things, the not so glamorous parts of the story. And really all this is kind of pointing out is the spiritual state where they are at. They're remembering the great stories that their parents and grandparents told them, but they're kind of missing a lot of the key details of how that all came to be. So Ruth and Boaz are married. They have a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not let you..." Try that again without stuttering this time. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be your restorer of life and the sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." So, we're seeing the enactment of this Redeemer. Ruth had a child. But who are they turning their attention to? Naomi. It's as if this is now Naomi's son. They're continuing the family line. But I think what we're seeing here is the true main character of the story. So we've turned our focus to Boaz and Ruth and this love story that is developed. The story wasn't always really about them. It was about Naomi. And we'll finish out these last couple of verses, then we're going to take a look back here, and I'll kind of explain where I'm getting at that. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. And basically, she raised the child. And the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez was born, to Perez was born Hezron, and Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Amminadab. Amminadab was born to Nahshon, and Nahshon Salmon. And Salmon was born Boaz, to Boaz Obed. Obed was to Jesse, and Jesse to David. We're seeing basically the generations from Judah to King David. Now, like I said, the story was about Naomi. We started out with Naomi. The story led all the way up to when they got into Bethlehem, and then Naomi took a back seat for a moment while we paid attention to this Gentile woman, Ruth. Followed their story of how Ruth came to Boaz and he became the redeemer of the family. If we look back at Ruth here, we see a very familiar story that mirrors the entire Bible. This story of redemption, this love story and redemption, mirrors that of what God has done for us. Taking a look back, we see that a famine had came over Bethlehem in Judea. This was a resort of the sin that the nation was living in. God brought about a famine. And then Elimelech, we'll call him Adam, tried to do something about the sin. He tried to address it himself, and that was going out into the world. He tried to cover up what was going on. Famine had struck and driven him out. Adam sinned and was driven out. And they tried to compensate this failing on their own. We then move to how that led to a family of destruction. Elimelech passed away. His sons passed away, leaving Naomi. Naomi is our picture of Israel. Naomi, once she heard that things have gotten better, that God had brought redemption to Bethlehem, she came back into the promised land. Much like Israel, 40 years in the desert, as soon as things were right to go back, they came back to the promised land. Along the way, Israel had brought Gentiles into their family. But as we've seen, the Gentiles were still shunned upon. Now, do we remember what God's purpose to Israel was originally? There were several of them, but there were some key ones there. One, they are His chosen people. Two, as we see in Isaiah 42, they were to be God's shining light to the Gentiles. They were supposed to show God's way to them. And what was Ruth's words when she refused to leave Naomi? The Gentiles refused to leave Israel. Your God will be my God. She was seeking the redemption of the God of Israel. And then Boaz comes into our story here. She's been working hard, trying to make her way, trying to redeem herself in Bethlehem. Boaz comes in the picture and brings redemption tenfold, shows her the love of the God of Israel. So she was trying religion, but she found grace. But then we see a little twist in the story that might not line up initially with what we're thinking here. And that is Boaz says, wait a minute, there's someone else. We see this unnamed gentleman might have a shot at saving him. This is that religion. Boaz is essentially saying, here was the way that you were trying. Let's see what happens. He basically gave her a look at what she was trying, what was happening here. What did that religion do, that unspoken potential redeemer? This redeemer was Israel's attempt at religion. And what we seen was they wanted the promise, but they didn't want the extra baggage, the Gentiles. And this is exactly what Christ came into the world and was dealing with. Israel had pushed away the Gentiles. They didn't want anything to do with them. We want our God, our special God. He's our God. He can't be your God. You can't have him. They wanted that promised land. But they didn't want to do the other thing God asked them to do, be that shining light to these Gentiles. And that's what we see right here. He wanted the land, the promise, but he didn't want the Gentile. And so what we see here is Boaz is our picture of Christ. He came in and said, look, this is what you were dealing with, but I'm bringing you in. Quite literally, the picture of Christ married a Gentile. The bride of this picture of Christ was the Gentiles. Who is the bride of Christ? The church. What does the church consist of? Gentiles. So what we're seeing here is a picture of what exactly happened throughout this book in 4 short chapters. So Christ is the Redeemer, and he's, what we'll see here in this genealogy, is a descendant of Judah, descendant of David, came to be through a redemption story of a Gentile woman. Christ is the descendant not only of Jews, but of a Gentile. The only book here in this Bible, the Old Testament Torah, they seem to just look over the fact that they have a book named after a Gentile woman, which in that time was as low as it gets for the Israel's mind. So, we see that this entire thing is the redemption story of God. We can see it from Adam to Christ. We can see it here from Naomi to Obed. But that's not the only message we are seeing here. One other really important message, and I mentioned this when I started this book in chapter 1. I reminded you guys to keep an eye on the meanings of names. We remember Naomi was joy. Ruth was friend. And we had a few funny ones like, Abram and Abraham and all these other ones, how they got their names changed because at first it was something ridiculous and then it was something redeeming. And this book finishes off with some special message if you pay attention to the names. Let's look at them real fast. Now these are the generations of Perez. Now Perez means burst. And then we move to Hezron, which means joy. Ram, pleasing. Aminadab was supreme. Nashon is kinsman. Salmon is foretell or foretold. Boaz is strength. I'm sorry, I kind of skipped a spot there. Boaz is strength, but did I skip a name? Oh, I'm sorry. Perez's burst joy, and then it moves down to pleasing, supreme, kinsman foretold, and Salmon is actually peace, sorry. Salmon is peace, Boaz is strength. Obed is servant of God. Jesse is God's gift. And David means king. Now, if you take these all together, put them in a line exactly as they're listed, you get this statement. Burst with joy, a supreme kinsman foretold. Peace and strength, a servant of God, God's gifted king. The Messianic line starts with that message. And so, the overall message, what is the takeaway of this story? Quite simply is the picture of our redemption. We see this family was hit hard, left and right, famine, father dead, son's dead. Now you have a widow with her two widow daughter-in-laws. Naomi, though her name was Joy, she becomes bitter. She turns away. The Gentile daughter-in-law refuses to let that happen. She seeks that peace and comfort in the God of Israel. Her sister-in-law gives up and returns back to the world. So we see this faith of a Gentile woman, which leads to the redemption. That redemption is brought about by grace and faith. And that is where we are at. We are redeemed through grace and faith. And it is this picture that we've seen throughout the Bible summarized in a simple story. And that story, though, may not be relatable. But we see that this Ruth had stepped out in faith time and time again. She's lost everything. Follows her mother-in-law to Israel, where this God seems to be of grace and peace and a comfort to everybody. She follows through. She works her way until she finally finds a Redeemer. She pursues this Redeemer, and this Redeemer, though he saw her the whole time, slaving away, trying to impress, improve herself, it wasn't until she finally laid down at his feet and said, "Save me." And that's when he comes in and takes care of her. He redeems her. He even shows her, this is what you are working at. And it turns you away the minute it's no longer beneficial to it. And he redeems her and brings about the very line that brings the Messiah, who will be the ultimate Redeemer. So, with that said, story of Ruth. A beautiful story in itself, but take a step deeper and we see this beautiful redemption story that relates to everybody. With that, next week, Galatians. I'm excited. I'm nervous. Got a lot of work ahead of me. Let's see how it goes next week. Heavenly Father, we thank you. We've been able to come and see this redemption story that you've provided for us in such a simple way. A simple picture that can mean so much more if we just take the time to look at it and pay attention to the details. And as we see this, we see the redemption story that you have brought all humanity through, and we thank you. The picture of Boaz as a redeemer is only amplifies the ultimate redeemer in your son. And I just thank you for that. I thank you for the chance to be able to share your word. I thank you for a chance to come and worship you. Lord, I just pray blessings on everybody here, that you be with them and that you be able to just bless them and show them that grace and love that you have for them. Pray protection on everybody. May they have safe travels home this evening, and just be blessed throughout this week. In Jesus' name, amen.